Hello! Welcome back to Wednesdays with Finn. I am, as always, your beloved host, Finley. Today on the barely tangentially related list of topics that I call this series, we're going to cover Bollywood. You all should be aware that Indian cinema is one of the oldest and proudest cinematic traditions in the world. Just saying. Side note, I don't actually know how to correctly pronounce most of these words, and I apologize in advance. Someone please help me. Just correct me in the comments. Good lord. This is the story of Bollywood. Let us journey back to 1913. So, Hollywood actually predates Bollywood. So, when the Indian cinematic scene was kind of like getting started, the major center of filmmaking was in Bombay, now known as Mumbai. So, it was Bombay, Hollywood, Bollywood. It's a combination of sounds. You get it? Bollywood. There you go. So, you got this dude, and his name, his name, terrible pronunciation incoming, Dadasaheb Phalke. I am so sorry. Anyway, Mr. Phalke produces the very first Indian film ever made, which is a silent film called Raja Harishchandra. The film was a huge success, but unfortunately the initial growth of the Indian cinematic industry was pretty slow going despite this. I personally think that's a crime, but no one asked me. Why does no one appreciate silent film? Honestly, it might be because most of the early films were based on Indian classical works, which were not really that well known outside of India. They tended to follow storylines from things like the Ramayana or the Mahabharata, things that Indian audiences would know, but audiences in say Germany might not be as familiar with. Unfortunately, the result is that these movies, in the early days didn't have that much international appeal. The stuff that tended to sell overseas was usually kind of Hollywood-esque in nature, like action films and romances. The first talkie that was released in Bollywood cinema was called Alam Ara and was released in 1931. At this point, the Bollywood production industry began to just boom. There was a massive, massive increase in the number of production companies that were making movies at this time. This also means that the quality of films tended to go one of two ways. This pattern then continued until World War II happened and, the entire world was set on fire. India's looking around as hey, England, you know what we're tired of? You. The 1950s saw a massive wave of change in Indian social systems, and among these were Indian cinematic systems. Starting in 1947, you started to get this massive wave of Indian social consciousness films that took a really deep and critical look at Indian history and Indian culture. It was at this point that Indian movies began to blow up abroad. On to the Bible! Today we get to return to my favorite area of the Bible, the Old Testament. But today we're going to go back to the very beginning, the book of Genesis. Today's tale may be found in Genesis chapter 38. Context. So we got Jacob and Rachel and Leah living together. Rachel and Leah are the literal sister wives of Jacob because that is an excellent idea. Their entire marriage goes thusly. Oh, Jacob, do you love me yet? No. But I gave birth to a son. Thanks. I still don't love you. Time to emotionally abuse my sister. What did I do? This cycle will continue for some time. Out of this incredibly healthy dynamic comes a man named Judah, who is the fourth son of Leah, the elder of the two wives. I promise we will get to the actual story in a second. Anyway, there's something so fascinating to me about Judah, because Judah was in a really weird spot in the birth order. He is the youngest of the older set of Leah's sons, but he's right in the middle. He's the fourth of 12, right? So he's kind of situated to just see everything catch fire around him. For example, his sister Dinah was raped by this guy named Shechem, right? And so his older brothers, Simeon and Levi, go out and kill him along with every other person in the town. Jacob's reaction is to go, hey, why would you bring this danger in our heads? Rather than go, wow, my daughter was defiled. That might be just me reading this through a modern day lens, but I feel like Jacob could have mustered a little bit of anger over this. Either way, Judah would have grown up with the knowledge that his sister had received this injustice. Also, Leah strikes me as someone who is just petty as all get out, so she didn't let this go, and you also know that she was bad-mouthing Rachel the whole time. So you get this combination of this rivalry between his mom and his mom, and also the rape of his older sister, and just the seeming indifference of Jacob. I can kind of see how that would kind of harden a soul over a lifetime. The fact that it was his idea to sell Joseph into slavery rather than kill him does not surprise me. What did surprise me, however, was Judah offering his own life to save Benjamin when Joseph had him taken prisoner at the end of the story of Joseph. That is a massive change in character. I like to think that the moment that character change happened occurs in Genesis chapter 38. I know, finally I'm getting around to what I actually intended to talk about. This is a story of Judah and Tamar. Judah is living in Canaan, and he has three sons, Onan, and Shelah. Shelah? I don't know the. Anyway, he gets a wife for his eldest son, okay? But the thing is, was wicked in the Lord's sight, which, we don't even know what that means, but the Lord's like, you know what? You're gone. He just straight murks him. So is dead, all right? Now, the law of the time said, hey, Onan, you gotta marry your older brother's wife because, he needs his name to be continued on. Onan's like, not feeling it. You know what he does do, though, is he marries Tamar, the wife that was originally Ur's wife before he died, and he marries her, uses her for his own sexual pleasure, but then he spills his seed on the ground rather than impregnate her because he knows that if she has a kid, then he loses the extra bit of inheritance he would have gotten had Ur not had any progeny. That is some next level douchebaggery. In doing this, not only did he basically steal inheritance, he also completely made sure that Tamar had no support in her old age. God's like, you know what? You're gone too. So now Onan is dead. Now, according to the law, Tamar then has to be passed to the third brother, Shelah. But, at this point, Judah's like, this girl's a bad luck charm. She's gonna get my third son killed. Rather than think, wow, my parenting practices are so bad that 2 out of 3 of my children were killed for being wicked in the sight of the Lord. Maybe reflect on that a little bit, Judah. Judah tells Tamar to go home and says, hey, when my son Shelah is grown up, you can marry him. She's like, cool. So she goes back to her parents' house, which was humiliating. And then she waits and she waits and she waits and she waits and she waits. But friggin' nothing happens because Judah at this point is a butt. Time passes. Tamar finds out, oh, Judah's coming up for the sheep shearing. Now, if you don't know, at this point in Canaan, the sheep shearing season was a time of just unrivaled debauchery, okay? Sex everywhere. And also, part of that was, engaging in cult sex practices with cult prostitutes. So, Judah isn't exactly going up to pray to the Lord. Quite the opposite, really. Tamar sees that Shelah is now all grown up, and Judah's still not come to get her, so she's like, oh, heck, nah, Judah. Tamar takes off her widow stuff, then she puts on a veil, and all she does is just sit in front of the gate of this place called the Naim, right? Judah sees her and goes, a prostitute, let me proposition. Tamar's like, okay, I can work with this. Judah's all like, hey, what's up? You want to do the thing? Tamar's like, what you got? Judah's like, I don't know, I can give you a goat. Tamar's like, all right, but how do I know you're gonna follow through? Because, I've had promises broken before. Judah's like, I could get, what do you want? Tamar then demands Judah's staff, his seal, and its cord, and he gives it to her. Judah! They didn't do the frick-frack. And as often happens with the frick-frack snick-snack, Tamar ends up pregnant. The pregnancy gets back to Judah, and Judah's all like, burn her at the stake. But literally, as Tamar is being led to be burned, she hands over this bundle of stuff and says, bring this to Judah and see if he recognizes it. What a queen. Judah sees his staff and its seal and its cord, and he's like, oh snap, I'm a jerk. Points for self-awareness. Now, this is the moment that I think really marked the change for Judah because oh Lord, you never really see this level of just self-reflection before now. It took Tamar standing up to Judah and demanding justice for herself in the only way that was really available to her for him to go, wow, I think I might have been making a few mistakes here. Again, I can't really blame Judah though, because the environment that he was hatched from wouldn't really have prepared him to be a great parent, know what I'm saying? Then again, that could be said of basically anyone, which is why I love Tamar so much. Sometimes you can do everything right, like Tamar did, and people are still the worst. Stand up for what you are owed. I'm not saying sleep with your father-in-law. However, use the resources that are available to you, the resources that God has given you in the holiest way possible. Please don't sleep with your father-in-law. And demand justice, because you don't know how far-reaching the consequences of your actions are going to be. I don't know, what are your guys' thoughts? This is me just exegeting the passage for myself. So, tell me what you think. Also, what should I cover next? Y'all, I love doing these. Please engage. I hope you guys have a great night. See you next week. Until then, make wise choices, stay safe, and happy Wednesday.